My name is Stella Whitman. I was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, the youngest child in a conservative three-generation real estate family. Early on, I knew my place was never meant to be at the boardroom table. Everything in our home revolved around my father, Mr. Lawrence Whitman, who believed the family name was our greatest asset. As for me, I was just the only daughter born to marry someone suitable, have children, and stay quiet. My much older brothers, Brandon and Miles, were the family's pride. By high school, they were already attending business conferences and cocktail events to get familiar with the trade. I, on the other hand, was told to stay home, learn how to cook and master being a proper lady. But at 13, I started coding on an old computer gifted by a teacher. I stayed up countless nights learning Python, then Java, and by 15, I built my first small program. I still remember the moment I nervously handed my father a USB drive with a personal finance tool I'd created just for his company. He looked at it for a few seconds, then tossed it on the table. "Machines aren't for girls," he said. "Studying like that is just wasting your youth." I was speechless, but I didn't stop. By 17, I earned a full scholarship to a summer coding program in San Francisco. I was so happy I nearly cried when I opened the acceptance letter. But when I showed it to my parents, my father's face hardened. "No daughter of mine is traveling alone," he declared. "You'll stay home and start preparing for the engagement dinner. The Carter family just made an offer." I remember shaking with anger. "I'm not marrying anyone," I said. "I want to study. I want to become a software engineer." That's when his expression shifted. No more anger, just deep disappointment. "You're no longer worthy of this name," he told me. That night, I went back to my room and quietly packed a backpack. I brought my laptop, a change of clothes, and an old notebook filled with my first lines of code. I left the house just before midnight. No one came to see me off. No hug, no parting words. I slept curled up on a bench at a bus station that night, then took the cheapest ticket I could find to San Francisco. I didn't have much money, but I had passion, stubbornness, and wounds deep enough that I had nothing left to lose. For years after I did everything I could to survive tutoring, waiting tables, building cheap freelance apps, just to pay rent and keep learning, and I taught myself from secondhand books and free online courses, then earned global certifications one by one. 10 years later, I became the founder and CEO of Linxa Systems, an artificial intelligence startup that had just closed a Series C round at $185 million. Even when I was honored at a global tech summit, hailed by the media as a disruptive tech icon, my parents never once called as if I'd never existed. That was fine. I learned to extract value from being forgotten. Every line of code I wrote was a silent message. I'm worth it even if you don't see it. I don't know what made my mother call me again after 15 years of silence. Maybe it was the Forbes article last month, Stella Whitman the woman rewriting the rules of AI. Or maybe it was the photo of me standing beside the Secretary of Education, signing a new STEM scholarship program for girls. Or maybe they were sinking. The fourth time she called in 3 days, I finally answered, not out of curiosity, but because I wanted to hear the voice of the woman who stood by while I was pushed out into a snowstorm that night. "Stella, it's Mom," she said. "Yes," I answered like I was finalizing a contract. She took a long breath. "Your father, he wants to see you." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, really?" After 15 years, he suddenly remembers he has a daughter. "It's not what you think," she said. I cut her off. His company's crashing. I saw the internal reports. 2 consecutive quarters in the red. The Urban Loop project shut down. The largest shareholder just pulled out. Am I wrong? She was silent, but that silence said everything. I turned my chair toward the window. The city lights still shone, but something inside me, something old, had long since gone cold. "He wants to meet for what?" I asked. "There's a family dinner this Friday," she said. "He wants everyone there to talk. To start fresh." I didn't need to ask to know what that invitation really meant. "Start fresh or patch the ruins." She hesitated. "Stella, he won't admit it, but I know you're the only chance left. If you could just help a little." "No more just," I cut in coldly, like I was declining a weak investment pitch. A long silence followed. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry." I looked up surprised, but kept my face unreadable. Send me the address, I said. I'll think about it. After the call, I sat still for a moment, fingers tracing the edge of my walnut desk. Beneath the glass was a photo of my first all-female engineering team. 4 young women, their eyes lit up with belief. Not one of them came from a traditional family. I buzzed Elena, my senior assistant. Clear my schedule for Friday night. Book a private room at Maison Lucien and contact Jasper in PR. I want a family reunion script, something just subtle enough for the media to latch onto. Stella, are you really going? She asked. I'm not just attending, I replied. I'm directing the entire show now. That night, I opened the old wooden box in the corner of my closet. Inside were things I'd never thrown away, my first scholarship letter, a photo of the computer I built myself, and a sketch of the first software I ever designed. I picked up an old picture of myself as a child, smiling brightly, holding up a basic circuit board. Next to me, Brandon held a sports trophy, our father's hand proudly on his shoulder. I wasn't even being looked at. I exhaled slowly. This time he'll have no choice but to see me. I texted Jasper subject daughter returns. Brilliant female CEO reunites with traditional family after 15 years apart. But behind the scenes, a story the press has never heard. Low-key setup just enough for the press to sniff. Then I drafted an email to my mother, Friday evening, not the old place. We'll meet at Maison Lucien, 8 m. Sharp. Dad, Brandon, and Miles are all invited. I've arranged everything. And tell them to dress properly. The media tends to notice details. Nothing about this return was accidental. I wasn't coming back to hear an apology. I was coming back to reset the board, and now I was the one holding every piece. At Maison Lucien, on the rooftop level, crystal lights cascaded over each glass of Dom Perignon I had just ordered. The private glass room was fully soundproof, booked 3 days in advance with strict security clearance. I arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a deep navy silk dress, with clean lines and a high neckline, a choice both modest and powerful. No one in my family had ever seen me like this, and tonight they wouldn't forget it. My father arrived first, just as I expected. Lawrence Whitman had never been late for a meeting in his life. Even with his company plummeting, he showed up in a tailored gray suit and polished leather shoes. Stella, he said. Mr. Lawrence, I replied, not shaking his hand. He paused awkwardly, then sat down without protest. My mother arrived next quietly, avoiding direct eye contact. Her hair was now streaked with silver, but the burgundy dress she wore still hinted at the role she clung to the woman behind the successful man. I had no intention of shattering that image. She could dismantle it herself. Brandon and Miles arrived last 3 minutes late, still carrying that self-important air, despite the frayed hem on Brandon's suit and the worn-down heels on Miles's shoes. I smirked when they glanced around and saw me at the head of the table. I pointed to their seats already assigned. Please sit. Once everyone settled in, I raised my hand. The server stepped in and poured champagne. I lightly tapped my glass and spoke just loud enough. To family reunions, though, I doubt any of you expected one under circumstances like these. My father growled. What kind of family talk do you think this is? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my purse, pulled out an iPad, and swiped across the screens. Charts and data appeared negative cash flow lawsuits, pending suspicious pension fund activity. I slid the iPad to the center of the table. This is the real reason we're here. And I know it better than any of you. Brandon frowned. Who gave you the right? I don't need permission to investigate things that affect my family's name, I said, looking directly at my father. Did you know your company's stock is about to be delisted? The board has already scheduled a quiet vote to remove you. And I know exactly who they're nominating. He gripped the armrest. My mother covered her mouth, visibly pale. I'm not reclaiming the Whitman name, I continued, but I can save it on my terms. Miles interjected. Stella, you're acting like this all revolves around you. I turned to him, smiling without a trace of warmth. It does revolve around me. And if any of you want to survive this transition, you'll each play the role I assign. I pulled out a packet of printed documents, responsibility assignments, and placed one in front of each of them. In 1 month, I'm hosting a gala, Women Forward Advancing Women in Tech. Every major media outlet will be there. And the Whitman family, you people will be front and center. My father's voice dropped. What? You'll deliver the opening speech, I told him. You'll talk about realizing the brilliance of your daughter and your journey from tradition to transformation. I've already hired the speechwriter. You just need to rehearse. I'm not doing that, he said. Refuse, I replied. And next week, the shareholders will receive a full report on 3 of your financial violations tied to Urban Loop. I have copies of all 3. I turned to Brandon. You'll announce a STEM initiative for girls under the name Whitman Tech Future. I've already secured co-sponsorship from the Hightower Foundation. Decline, and I'll have independent auditors revisit the representation expenses you claimed at the Boston branch. Brandon flushed, but said nothing. And Mom, I said, looking at her directly, you'll be the face of a scholarship program for young women of color, pursuing programming. It will be named the Eleanor Fund because I still want your name attached to something good. My mother began to cry, but she didn't look away. I stood slowly. Tonight isn't an offer. It's an ultimatum. If you agree, I'll help you survive the coming shift. If you refuse, check the headlines tomorrow morning. I picked up my clutch, ready to leave, but turned back with one last line. And smile beautifully when the cameras turn your way, because starting now, you'll be playing the role of a progressive, inclusive family before I choose to play the role of the one who ends it all. 3 days after that dinner at Maison Lucien, I received an email from our internal PR team. Brandon was scheduled to appear on the Inside Legacy talk show to discuss the STEM initiative for girls, which he would represent. I frowned. Brandon was never one to enjoy being on camera, much less someone who apologized in public. I clicked the video link. The studio appeared on screen, soft lighting, cool blue backdrop, the Women Forward logo in the corner. Brandon sat upright, hands neatly folded on his lap. The host asked, "Is there anything you'd like to share with the public, especially with your sister?" Brandon paused for a second, then lowered his head and exhaled slowly. "I used to think women didn't belong in tech," he said. "That's what my father taught me. And I was foolish enough to believe siblings didn't need to protect each other as long as I held my place." He looked up, voice cracking slightly. "But Stella isn't just my sister. She's the only person in this family who had the courage to confront our mistakes. And I'm sorry." My face flushed not from emotion, but from shock. Brandon, the same man who once mocked me for coding for fun when I got my scholarship, was now crying on national television. I didn't even have time to react before my phone buzzed. It was Mom. I hesitated for a second, then picked up. "Stella, can we meet for a moment?" "Somewhere near your office." "Just 10 minutes. I agreed to meet at a small cafe, just 5 minutes' walk from the Linksa building. She was already sitting in the corner, holding a full cup of latte. No makeup, no earrings, her eyes unable to hide the redness. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and kept just enough distance. "I don't have much time," I said. "I know," she replied. She placed a thin, worn file folder on the table. "These are things I've kept for more than a decade." I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were printouts from tech blogs, photos of me at early conferences, articles from the year I won the Women in Innovation Award event invitations, even a French write-up about the AI version I developed in Europe. Some pages were folded, a few smudged, as if touched by water. "I never knew how to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. "After you left, every time your name appeared in the news, I'd cut it out, print it, and save it here. Every time your father growled, 'She no longer exists to this family,' I'd quietly open this file and read every word. I stayed silent, though a tightness pulled at my chest. If you'll let me," she continued, "I want to do this for real. Not for show, not for your father, but because I know I turned my back on the one child who had the courage to live with truth." I met her eyes that, after all these years, finally didn't turn away. "You've never needed me," she said. "And that's exactly why you have every reason to question this. I know, but you're no longer that 17-year-old girl, and I'm no longer the woman who nodded every time your father said you were wrong." "What exactly do you want to do?" I asked. She pulled out another sheet of paper, an application form to become an executive advisor for the Eleanor Fund. "I want to manage the scholarship myself," she said, "to meet the girls, hear their stories, and use my voice to support them, as they enter a world you once had to break into alone. I gave a slight nod. If you mess this up, the public will expose everything within 24 hours. Are you ready for that? I'm no longer afraid of judgment, she said. I'm only afraid of not doing the right thing before it's too late. I didn't hug her. I didn't cry. But for the first time, I felt I wasn't the only one fighting on this battlefield anymore. That evening, I sat in my office, looking out over the city, replaying the interview clip of Brandon. This time, I listened not to verify his emotions, but because I wanted to believe that something real might be changing. A message from Mom popped up. Can you take me to the scholarship center tomorrow to meet the girls? I want to get started early. I looked down at my hand on the desk, steady but no longer cold. I typed back one word, yes. The Women Forward Gala kicked off at 8 p.m. At the Metropolitan Grand Hall in the heart of Manhattan. I stood backstage, peering through the velvet curtain as the seats filled up with tech investors, media education leaders, and the young women selected for the inaugural scholarship cohort. I wore a sleek, off-shoulder black gown, simple, but every metallic thread caught the light just right. I didn't need jewelry. My name already gleamed on its own. Your family's here, Elena whispered beside me. And Mr. Lawrence looks a little out of place. I wasn't surprised. My father had never stood in front of a crowd to apologize, but tonight he had agreed, not because I forced him, at least I wanted to believe that, but because he'd started to understand. I stepped onto the stage to applause. Behind me, the giant LED screen lit up with the words, Women Who Lead the Future. I held the mic, my gaze unwavering. 15 years ago, I began. I was told that technology wasn't for girls, that women should step aside and support men in chasing success. But today, I'd like to rewrite that script. I turned and the screen shifted to a slideshow of 20 outstanding female students, each one a story, a dream. These are pioneers, and each of them will receive a full scholarship from the Eleanor Fund to study research and create without limitation. Applause broke out across the hall. I spotted my mother rising to her feet, her eyes misty with pride. Beside her, Brandon, now Chief Operating Officer, was whispering something to a familiar investor. I drew a deep breath and looked toward my father. Now there's someone else who wants to share a few words. I invited him to the stage. He walked slowly but with steadiness. Under the lights, the silver in his hair shimmered like a reflection of all the years spent in rigid tradition. He took the mic and paused. The room fell silent. I'm Lawrence Whitman, and I was wrong, he said. A ripple moved through the crowd. He continued wrong to believe success came in only one shape. Wrong not to recognize that my daughter Stella saw the future long before the rest of us did. He looked at me then, out to the audience. I'm voluntarily stepping down as chairman of Whitman Holdings, transferring full leadership to Stella, not because she's my daughter, but because she's the most capable person for the job. The applause surged like a wave. The screen behind us lit up with a collage of images from my early startup days, alongside faces of young women now studying engineering across the U.S. After his speech, my mother joined the stage with two of the first Eleanor Fund students, introducing a new mentorship program and immersive tech internships. She didn't read from notes, every word came from the heart. From the wings, I watched Brandon shake hands with a Japanese sponsor. Miles, the same man who once called STEM Child's Play, was exchanging contacts with a group of student founders working on a public health app. He had started backing social projects through his new initiative, Whitman for Impact. For the first time, my entire family wasn't performing. They were doing the work. The next morning, my father's speech video surpassed 10 million views. The Wall Street Journal headline read, From Control to Change the Whitman Family, and a transformation that redefined women in tech. I sat in my office still wearing the white shirt from the night before, eyes sleepless but strangely at peace inside. How do you feel? Elena asked, walking in with a cup of coffee. For the first time in my life, I said, I don't feel like I need to prove anything to my family. And the media is calling it a historic transfer of legacy. I smiled. I don't need legacy. I just want to build a world where no girl is ever told she doesn't belong again. On my desk, a new email popped up from the sender UN Women Tech Division, with the subject Invitation for Stella Whitman to serve as a global advisor for women in tech programs. I leaned back in my chair. Right then, a message from Mom appeared. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with the new scholarship students. Can you drop by? I'd love for you to share your journey. I typed back a single word, absolutely. 3 weeks after the gala, I was invited to speak at the International Tech Conference, TechFirst 2030 in Berlin. The theme was Transformative Leadership, When Women Redefine Power. I declined the traditional keynote format and instead invited Sophie Tran, one of the Eleanor Fund scholars, to share the stage with me. She was only 19, but had already made waves in the coding community by building an AI platform that detects gender bias in digital language, from workplace emails to product ads. I call it Verity Protocol, she said. But my friends, they call it Stella Check. The room chuckled softly. I stood beside her, my heart skipping a beat. Sophie demonstrated the software interface on screen. Email phrases like professional, like a man, or a strong masculine solution were highlighted in red with neutral, inclusive alternatives suggested. It's not that we're weak and need protection, she explained. It's that unconscious bias has been treated as normal for far too long. It's time to reprogram the language of tech itself. The applause lasted almost 2 full minutes. 2 days later, 3 major U.S. tech corporations sent official confirmations they would integrate Stella Check into all internal communication systems. A week after that, Samsung AI Lab proposed a partnership to develop a multilingual international version. By the end of the month, the United Nations Technology Commission announced that Stella Check would serve as the global reference standard for AI projects involving human interaction. Headlines flooded every major publication, from Disowned Daughter to Woman, rewriting the power structure of tech. Verity Protocol ushers in a new era of equitable code. I read the headlines from the top floor of Linksa, but I no longer felt the rush or the tears I used to, because now I understood this was no longer just my story. That Friday afternoon, I visited the lab at Linksa headquarters. The room was bright, packed with desks and buzzing with energy. New Eleanor Fund recipients were testing the beta version of Stella Check 2 together. Stella Sophie called, waving me over. I want to show you the social media test run. I sat beside her. On the screen was a flagged chat where an AI caught a suggestion that a female employee should soften her tone to keep the team stable. The neutral rewrite next to it read, "Encourage emotional regulation in a diverse environment." Sophie said, "I think version 2 can help startups reshape company culture from the ground up." I looked at her, remembering myself at 17, laptop in hand, full of dreams, yet shut out behind closed doors. You know, I said, if I'd had a tool like this back then, maybe I wouldn't have had to leave home that snowy night. Sophie smiled. But if you hadn't left, I and thousands of others wouldn't be here. The next morning, I received an invitation from the Davos Forum to be a guest of honor. The topic, restructuring gender leadership in the digital age. At the same time, my mother sent me a photo from a classroom in Detroit. She had just hosted a workshop on women's rights and basic coding with a group of 9th grade students. She stood in the center, hair loose, no makeup, eyes radiant. Brandon was in Singapore working with Sophie's team to implement Stella Check at our new branch. Miles had just updated me. He was leading a new program funding coding tuition for formerly incarcerated women. I laughed to myself, not because of their transformation, but because I realized something: I was no longer alone in this revolution. I stood backstage at the Global Women Forward 2040 Gala, held for the first time at Seattle's iconic Dome venue, once a symbol of exclusion in tech, now reborn, to honor those who were once pushed aside. In front of me, over 2,000 guests sat in person, with millions more watching online. In the front row, my mother sat between 2 students from Nigeria and Argentina. Brandon was guiding scholarship mentors into small groups. Miles had just arrived with a volunteer team from Detroit, introducing an app to help women re-enter society after prison. My family, once the ones who shut me out, were now the ones opening doors, not in name, but in action. Soft music played, signaling it was my turn. I stepped onto the center of the stage, white light gently washing over me. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me. I smiled and took the mic. Not long ago, I thought I only had 2 choices: revenge or forgetting. I paused, letting the silence settle. But it turns out there's a third path, one where we don't let the past weigh us down, but instead use it as a foundation. That path is change. Behind me, the giant screen displayed images of female students from over 30 countries learning coding, managing teaching, and inspiring. I was once called the lost daughter, cast out of the very house I grew up in, I continued. And for years I carried a kind of anger I couldn't name. But if I had used that anger to destroy, I would have only repeated the same cycle I once suffered through. I looked toward my mother. She was wiping away tears, but smiling with quiet pride. So I chose something else, I said. I chose to build. The room was completely still. I drew in a deep breath. And today, I want to say this: revenge might start a story, but it's transformation, persistence, and compassion that have the power to end it with a better future. Applause began, hesitant at first, then rising. This year's gala isn't just an event, I said. It's a milestone, a reminder that we don't need permission to take up space. We just need to choose the right moment to step forward and step forward together. The screen behind me shifted to a new logo, Stella Next Leading Tech with Purpose. My team and I will personally mentor 100 young women each year from all over the world to become the next generation of tech leaders, not just skilled in software, but also in empathy, not just programmers, but community designers. I extended my hand toward the audience. And I'm not doing this alone. My mother walked onto the stage, hand in hand with Sophie and two scholarship students from Chile and Morocco. Brandon and Miles followed. My entire family stood beside me. This time not for show, they had chosen to stay to change with me. Together we raised our hands to greet the crowd. The lights dimmed gently, and the entire room rose in applause. There were no more victims in this story, only people choosing to build a new future. That night, I stayed late in my small office on the 21st floor of Linksa. It wasn't as luxurious as the penthouse I once used, but I liked it more because it was quiet and had a view of the night sky. On the desk was a letter I'd written to myself at 17. I had once planned to send it as a declaration of war. Now I simply turned it over, picked up a pen and wrote, "We didn't get revenge. We led the way. We didn't repeat the pain. We redefined the legacy. And most importantly, we made sure no girl ever has to stand alone again." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer next to a fresh stack of blank paper. Tomorrow, I would begin writing a new chapter, not one of pain, but of spreading hope. Because instead of using the ascending the throne of power, my story isn't just about overcoming rejection and injustice. It's a powerful reminder that big change often begins with small acts of courage. From a girl cast out of her home for loving technology, I became a global symbol of transformation and purpose-driven leadership. In the real world, those who've been pushed to the margins can absolutely become the ones who reshape the system if they're willing to rise to learn and to choose to build instead of break.